10 p.m. on a Friday night and I have a thesis to be writing, but here we are asking the question, is Twilight any good? Apparently Midnight Sun is coming out after all this time, so I guess this is where my priorities are now. Not to be a total douchebag, but she just said I was wearing twice in one sentence. And we're still on page 1. Here comes Bella, creating a trope to plague us all till the day we die. Boo-hoo, I have ivory skin, and I'm thin but soft. Oh, the humanity, I'm so ugly. I don't know if it's because it's so late, but I'm fucking dying at her name. I'm Isabella Swan. Okay, but Bella's such a little bitch, though. She's like, oh, this guy is so helpful. How dare he? And he has skin problems. Ew. And he doesn't understand sarcasm. Small towns are shitty. Bella's meeting the Cullens for the first time, and she's like, they all had old people names because they're like Edward and Emmett and Rosalie. And I'm like, bitch, you're named Isabella Swan. Reading Twilight for the first time in 12 years, part 2. Literally all of Bella's thoughts about her classmates are mean. Like, he has zits, she has a bad perm, they have dark circles under their eyes. I was really liking Edward because he seems way more funny than I remember him being from the movies. But then he just like straight up is like, I think you have more pain than you let on. It's like, you don't know her. What are you doing? Shut up. I do not remember Edward being this savage. He's like always making fun of her and like laughing at everything she says, and I'm kind of here for it. I don't know if this is a romance thing or a Twilight thing, but like Bella just met Edward. They've had like one conversation. He saved her and she's fucking obsessed with him. Like, I'm not just saying in her actions, like her thoughts are like, Edward, 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 I need to stop being so obsessed with Edward. But it's like, bitch, why are you obsessed with him? You just met. Bella and Edward have fantastic banter. I'm surprised. 100 pages in and she already has 4 men after her. What am I doing wrong? Is it that the bluish green hair blatantly screams homosexual? Reading Twilight for the first time in 12 years, part 3. It's past my bedtime. Can we talk about how Stephanie Meyer just described Jacob Black's skin as red? The entire plot of this novel is just men being in love with Bella for no reason, while all of the women around them get pissed off about it. I had no idea that Bella deliberately flirts with Jacob to get information out of him, and that's why he falls in love with her. She's such a little asshole. Everybody that has their hair in a ponytail is described as using a rubber band, and I'm like, is this an American term for a hair elastic? Because here in Canada, if you say rubber band, it literally means made of rubber, and that shit hurts your hair. Why the fuck would you do that? Where did you learn to wear a ponytail? I was like, if Edward is a vampire, it doesn't matter. I'm already in too deep. But I'm like, bitch, what do you mean you're in too deep? You've had one conversation. I don't understand. You're in a fucking puddle. Reading Twilight for the first time in 12 years, part 4. I am looking haggard this morning. 2 a.m. will do that to us old ladies. Do you ever feel like The Vampire Diaries is just Twilight, but with all of the dumb shit fixed? They've just finished a shopping trip and Bella's like, it was really quick. I knew exactly what to say. I've done this before. I'm like, bitch, we've all done that. Who hasn't gone shopping with their friends before? You're not special. I really don't like Bella as a protagonist, but her characterization is quite strong and her voice is very clear, so I can definitely see why this was so popular and why so many young kids in particular were really drawn to this story. So Bella just gets stalked by some creepy bad guys, and then Edward saves her, and then she's like, how did you know I was here? And Edward's like, I followed you into this next town over. And she's like, oh, so romantic. And I'm like, bitch, he just did the same thing as those creepy assholes, and he's probably killed a lot more people. Edward wants to be congratulated for not killing the bad men that wanted to do horrible things to a teenage girl, and I'm like, should have killed him. Reading Twilight, part 5. Bella is using dial-up internet. When the fuck was this book published? How old is this shit? I don't even know how that works. So Bella's interviewing Edward about being a vampire, and he's kind of going along with it and implying that she's right. And he's like, don't you care at all? And she's like, no, why would I care? On the one hand, I'm like, girl, you have some issues, like, you're like, run away. But then on the other hand, I'm like, if somebody I love told me that they were a vampire, would I care? And at this point, I just feel like I have read and watched way too much teen fantasy romance for me to care either. I'd just be like, cool, man. How can I help? Bella's like, I've noticed that men are crabbier when they're hungry. And Edward's like, wow, Bella, you're so observant. And I'm like, wow, Bella, you're so sexist. At first, Edward was a vampire. Second, there was a part of him and I didn't know how potent that part might be that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him. The classic famous Twilight line coming in at page 195, and I'm just over here like, you've had 2 conversations! Reading Twilight, part 6. they're arguing over which one of them is more obsessed with the other. So the way that Edward's sparkling is described is essentially that he's so white that when the sun hits him it glints like diamonds. So I would like to know, do vampires of color sparkle? Edward's like, I want nothing more than to kill you. And Bella's like, well, I'm here, which means that I'd rather die than stay away from you. I'm such an idiot. And I'm like, well, at least this bitch is self-aware. I've just gotten to the part where Edward says he watches Bella sleep, and I'm just like, I hate it so much. I just feel like this book would make way more sense if it was a horror story. I like to watch you sleep. I think these bitches have known each other for like 2 weeks and they're already talking about getting married. And I've just realized that marriage is a euphemism for sex. You can so tell this book was written by a Mormon. Funny story, when I was a teenager, my grandma subscribed me to this Christian Girls magazine, which had a book review section, and it said that you shouldn't read The Mortal Instruments because it has angels and demons. So it's kind of a mockery of biblical mythology, but you should read Twilight because it preaches abstinence until marriage. Reading Twilight Part 7. Page 314, and Bella's like, I love you, and Edward's like, you are my life now, and I'm like, when did you even fall in love? Like, you've hung out like 3 times and you don't know anything about each other. Edward says he's hungry, so Bella clutches her throat and looks scared, and then Edward looks horrified, and I'm like, finally, Bella did something I approve of. She finally told a joke that wasn't just bitchy about somebody else. Edward has just called Bella his boyfriend, and she's unhappy with it because she thought they were something more. What more is there? You're 17 years old and you just met. She just fainted because she forgot to breathe when he kissed her. Stop! Edward just took Bella's tear off her face and then went like this. What? I'm getting a little bit bored of Bella and Edward's love story. While I personally think both of these characters are flawed, they don't think each other's flawed. So it's just super boring because it's like, oh, you're so perfect. No, you're so perfect. I seem to recall at some point Bella gets kidnapped by some other vampire, so I'm kind of hoping that happens soon. Reading Twilight Part 8. I'm losing steam. Of all the characters in this book, I think that Laurent is clearly the most interesting, and I would like a spin-off series of his life, and we can forget about all these other boring dweebs. Bella's telling Charlie that she's miserable so she can leave and keep him safe. And I just feel so sad. Like, Charlie's such a gem. He don't deserve that. I mean, I know it's necessary, but like... So I just finished my thesis. Well, mostly I gotta do a final read-through tomorrow and double-check my footnotes. But that means it's time to read the last 100 pages of Twilight! Bella's going to meet the evil vampire that kidnapped her mother, supposedly, and she has time to write one letter of goodbye because she's certain she's gonna die. And the only person she thinks to write to is Edward. Not her father, not her mother, the people who raised her, whom she's known her whole life. No. Edward. She doesn't even think to apologize to Charlie, whose heart she just broke for repeating her mother's words. Like, of all the things, just be like, hey dad, I didn't mean it, I'm so sorry, I love. Reading Twilight Part 9. It's annoyingly convenient that the hunter happened to be the one that turned Alice when they spent the whole book being like, how did Alice get turned? None of us know. None of us remember. Because it wasn't really delved into that much, it was just sort of like a passing side comment. It just doesn't really feel deserved that the hunter suddenly shows up with the explanation. Like, nobody had to look for it, and he didn't react at all when he ran into her earlier. Bella's like, I need to be a vampire because Edward is the only thing I can't stand to lose. And I'm like, oh, that's why she didn't write to her parents when she thought she was gonna die. I got this book from my friend, and I want to know when it was printed because I just found a typo. 2 week at most. Must have been an early edition. Edward is genuinely annoyed because Jacob called Bella pretty, not because, oh my gosh, another man called my girlfriend pretty. Because she's so much more than pretty, she's beautiful. Final thoughts. This book series is not really for me. I find the romance extremely cringy to get through and their dynamic to be very toxic and codependent. So can't say that I really love it, but I will say I see the appeal. The writing definitely pulls you in and the characterization is strong. So I see why people like it. Obviously, we can't emphasize enough how much these books really did for YA. I feel like they really kind of jump-started the genre as its own thing rather than like children's literature and adult literature as it was classified before. And you can see a lot of the tropes that became extremely popular, like the not like other girls, this whole protagonist is super special, born for something greater, is so pretty but doesn't know she's pretty. A lot of the things that we unpack now and don't like, but definitely this book did a ton for shaping the genre, so we have to credit it for that. So to answer the question with which I begun, is Twilight good? I would say a resounding no, but I recognize that is a very subjective no. So if you enjoy this book, power to ya. Thank you for watching this review. I like to watch you